All right, well, thank you so much. So often we think about abortion as quite a philosophical or ethical argument, which it is, but we also have to confront the reality of what that looks like in a clinic and within the industry, and there's no three people better to help us do that today than these three gentlemen who've really been inside the belly of the beast, have seen what happens in the inside, have come out the other side, found healing, and are here to tell us about it. So I want to use these next 45 minutes to really dive in to what you saw and experienced and what we can be learning and doing better. And so firstly, I'm going to come over to Dr. Haywood Robinson, who joins us all the way from America and has experience as having an abortionist. Haywood, let's have a kind of brief introduction to you, because you grew up quite humbly in the South Central Los Angeles district. What inspired you to go into medicine in the first place?
Well, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, the Lord called me to medicine. I had no professionals in my family. No one had graduated from college in my immediate or extended family. But I know retrospectively that was just the Lord speaking into my spirit saying, you know, I'm calling you to be a physician. And I maintained that desire, and I never wanted to be anything else other than a physician. I graduated from high school, public high school, went on to do undergraduate studies and medical school, and ultimately, right in the same community where I grew up, I had residency training in family medicine, no more than about 10 miles from where I grew up. Practiced for about 40 years in College Station, Texas, which is about 100 miles north of Houston. And I can say that it was definitely a calling, and there's a season for everything. And as we share on this panel, I'll be kind of filling in a hole. There are quite a few blanks in that 40 years, and I'm thankful for that, but also thankful for the thousands of people that I was able to serve and be a part of in their lives.
So as you kind of progressed in your medical career, one thing about your story that surprised me was that you were actually taught by your late wife to perform abortions. How did that come about? Well,
again, I trained in South Central Los Angeles, about 10 miles from where I grew up at Martin Luther King Charles R. Drew Medical Center. During my internship, I met a young lady from the island republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Her name was Noreen Johnson, and we became colleagues, and she actually helped train me in obstetrics and gynecology. In family medicine, you know, you have to have experience in all the various medical specialties, you know, internal medicine, surgery, obstetrics, gynecology, pediatrics. Well, during my time in training in obstetrics and gynecology, Noreen Johnson helped train me, which indeed included abortion training. And later on, we did become involved socially. Our initial relationship was strictly professional. But later on, and during residency training, we became closer, and eventually we got married right after residency training. After learning to do the abortion procedure, the first trimester abortion procedure, during that time, and that would have been the late 70s, the primary method was a mechanical abortion or dilation and curettage, which is technically not a real complicated procedure. It can be done in about 10 minutes or so, and that's the same procedure many women have after they've had a spontaneous miscarriage or a spontaneous abortion to evacuate the remaining products of conception out of the womb. That same procedure can be used to destroy a normal pregnancy, and that's where the money was. And in Los Angeles, during that time of my training, there seemed to be an abortion facility every few blocks or so. So it's really no problem to find time after hours on weekends to have a side hustle, as they call it. Today, we called it moonlighting, making good money. And I did indeed find out and see it retrospectively that the love of money is indeed the root of all evil.
What was it like working in there? Does it have an emotional impact on you, or were you just kind of doing a run-of-the-mill procedure that you didn't kind of necessarily see the weight of?
Well, I don't think anyone really enjoys working in an abortion facility. I didn't really enjoy it, and you don't do it for humanitarian purposes. You don't see free volunteer abortion facilities, right? It's basically for the money. And once you have an acquired appetite for that, really, it's easy money. It's the money that really drives that equation. If you were to subtract the variable of money out of the abortion equation, we would not be sitting here having this particular meeting today. It's all about the money, and of course, it's driven by the evil one, but it's the money that sustains you. So I couldn't wait to finish my time or my given shift on doing abortions, because it's just not something that's enjoyable.
And tell us, during that shift, can you describe to us briefly what exactly an abortion procedure involves?
Yeah. Well, that experience illustrates how a human being can progressively harden their heart and how they become day-to-day desensitized and dehumanized against the innocent preborn child and the mother. Because what you're doing is you're basically going from one room to the other. You've never met this woman. She's laying down on the table, and in 10 minutes, you rob this lady of the most precious gift that they're ever going to have. And that's the gift and the blessing of having a baby. There's no bonding. There's many times no eye contact. You know, many of these women don't really want to be there in the first place because it's just not natural for a woman to want to harm their child. It's not a natural thing, and we know because we're pro-lifers now that most of the women are coerced. They feel that they're in a hopeless situation, and they just really don't want to be there. But one of the more unfortunate situations I've seen, and one of the more tragic situations, we've got to recognize about 15% of the women who abort their first child aren't able to get pregnant again. Those are the most unfortunate and tragic situations when a woman has to live her life knowing that they paid to have the only child that they were going to have killed. So it's tragedy. It leaves nothing but a wake of sorrow, remorse. I have remorse, but in a greater sense, I know I have the forgiveness of the Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen. Well, thank you for sharing that. It sounds like a very difficult period that you're going through back in the 70s. Now, Adam, let me bring you in here because sometime later, over in the UK, you also found yourself in an abortion clinic, in an abortion room, but in a different kind of experience because you were getting medical training for the army. How did you find yourself in an abortion clinic?
So first I want to thank Isabel and March for Life for inviting me, and it's so encouraging to see so many young people in the audience, and just to encourage everyone here to get your children involved. I've got my 2 kids at the front here, and just thank you to have the encouragement of seeing these people here. So I was on a medical placement at a hospital. I was based in accident and emergency. And whilst I was there, one of the doctors said to me, why don't you help in the abortion clinics? They're fast procedures, in and out. You can help the anaesthetist with airway management and cannulation. Would you be okay with that? And I thought it was a strange question. I said, well, why wouldn't I be okay with that? And he said, well they're abortions. And at that time, I was brought up in an atheist household. I just went through a normal educational system. I had no idea that abortion was even controversial. That was how hardened my heart was. I'd never particularly thought about the procedure until about 3 years beforehand. I'd paid for an ex-girlfriend to have an abortion. At the time, I thought this is what you do. It never even occurred to me that you did anything else with an unplanned pregnancy. And so that question really surprised me when this doctor asked. So I did assist 2 clinics. They were on a Thursday, and there were 15-minute procedures, in and out. I think I probably assisted in about 30 abortion procedures.
Wow, okay. And so during that short period of time, what stood out to you whilst you were in there? Obviously, you didn't have a pro-life perspective, you didn't have a kind of emotional connection to it, but what struck you?
So a couple of things struck me. When I was in there, you could see, I was at the top end of the patient, airway management, and at the bottom end, the abortionist was I mean, it's crude to put it this way, but essentially suctioning the babies out of the woman into a glass jar. And they were explaining to me that this jar would be taken next door, where a nurse would check to make sure all the parts of the baby were there. These were first trimester abortions, so the babies would have been small at that stage. So I do remember that, and the jar full of blood. But what really struck out to me was one of the nurses mentioned to a colleague, I wonder if they'll be crying today. And I said to her, what do you mean? And she explained to me that it wasn't unusual for the women to wake up in recovery, so they go out in the trolley, wait in the recovery area, and as they wake up, it was common for one woman to start crying, and she would then set off all the other women. And it occurred to me, there's obviously, you know, this seemed unusual to me. I couldn't understand why would somebody wake up from a procedure crying. And obviously now I'm pro-life, and you realize that every abortion comes with grief. You're losing a child is taken, a life is lost. And as we've already spoken about mental health, we've got a cognitive disconnect within our nation over the fact that abortion, every abortion, no matter how early, is the taking of a human life. And that really struck me.
Well, we're so often told, aren't we, that it's just like getting a tooth pulled or getting a standard healthcare procedure. But how many times do people typically cry after such a typical healthcare procedure? So we know it is different. And it sounds like the industry know that it's different as well. Now, Kevin, you were involved in the industry as well from a different perspective, in a more managerial position, managing healthcare clinics across the world, really, internationally. When did you first come across abortions taking place in the facilities that you were managing?
Yeah. Good afternoon, I think we are now, or close to it. Good to see you all. I was working in Uganda in the years 2000, so about 2010 was the first time I came across abortion. I was part of the leadership team at a large private hospital in Uganda, and the context, the setting is that then and still abortion is largely illegal in the country. And one morning, my clinical team brought in a case to me of a teenage schoolgirl who had been assaulted and had become pregnant. And the discussion was, well, what were we going to do? And, you know, there's an underlying faith base in Uganda. Large numbers of the people working in the hospital group were of faith, the Christian faith. And I thought, well, this will be pretty straightforward. We'll take care of the girl and help her through her pregnancy and all the rest of it. And knowing, of course, that it's illegal. And, you know, we had the debate around the table, senior people. I was chief executive at the time. And the consensus in the room was, well, this was going to ruin this young girl's life. And the best thing for her was an abortion. And I said, but abortion's illegal. And they said, yes, but there's this organization we know who will look after her. And we can take her there this afternoon, and everything will be fine. And I said, who is that? And they said, oh, an organization called Mary Stopes. And I sort of had memory of the name from previous, you know, time in the UK or whatever, but that was my first real connection. And at that time, I was obviously surprised that they had chosen this route, that this was the decision. And as chief executive, I was a bit worried that I would end up in jail if anybody found out, because it was illegal. And as chief exec, I would have been the person in jail. So it was a bit of a worrying time, yes.
Yeah, I bet that must have been very surprising. Not only that they were going to take this step so rushedly, you know, put her in for an abortion this afternoon. We don't even know what she wanted to do or if she'd been fully expressing support for that. And furthermore, that it was illegal. But later on, you found out information that this was quite common in the healthcare world in Uganda.
Yeah, so my education, as it were, continued from that point forward. And what I discovered was that senior medical professionals, the obs-gynae team in particular, were often giving women with unplanned or unwanted pregnancies misoprostol. And they were saying, look, we can't help you because it's illegal. But under the table, here's a tablet, and if you want to take this tablet tonight, round about, you know, midnight or whatever, by tomorrow morning you'll be bleeding. And because you're bleeding, you obviously will attend hospital, and if you come in bleeding and in effect miscarrying, then by law and ethically, we can look after you. And so I found this was a common practice. It was a way of getting around the restrictive legislation at that time, yeah.
That sounds quite dangerous to me.
Well, it can be dangerous, and particularly if the woman either takes too many of the misoprostol and she's not not close to a healthcare facility. So it was always done within the bounds of the,
right.
You know, the hospital. You're not that far from the hospital. Please come in as, you know, 7 o'clock in the morning, and we'll start looking after you. Okay.
So at this point, you were still quite surprised and shocked to find out what was going on. But then we know later in your journey, you ended up working for none other than Mary Stopes International. So what happened there? What was it that led you into that industry?
I suppose the what happened, Lois, is quite a big question. But by 2013, I was beginning to get to the end of my time with the hospital group. And I think I'd got to the point where wearing my public health hat, I was beginning to see the harm of either illegal or what we were referring to at that point in time as unsafe abortions, where women were accessing these the misoprostol, the abortion pills, and trying to do it themselves and then ending up in trouble and needing additional care. And so from a harm reduction strategy, a public health harm reduction strategy, I bought into the sense of, well, these women, it's not like we're talking them into having an abortion. They're having an abortion anyway. And if they're going to have abortion anyway, then surely it's better if they have that abortion in a medical setting, in a clean environment where things can be done safely and correctly. And that was the initial strategy that I led into Mary Stopes with, yes.
And that, at one time, was the kind of rhetoric that Mary Stopes and others were putting forward, but you noticed a shift over your time there, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, so at that time, Mary Stopes, Planned Parenthood, WHO, the World Health Organization, talked about it very much as comprehensive, safe abortion care, and it was a full protocol of care from the very moment the woman entered the clinic, the consultation, the assessment, testing for STIs, testing for other things, the procedure itself, follow-up, contraception. And that was what Mary Stopes was saying it was all about. But by 2015, 2016, that changed, and it changed quite dramatically from a comprehensive care provided by a medical team in clinic settings to basically what we would refer to in this room as do-it-yourself. So Mary Stopes' strategy, along with its peer groups, was to get the abortion pill, get it registered in each of these countries. I was working across 30 countries internationally. Get it registered, get it distributed through small drug shops, let women just buy it over the counter, no assessment, no care, take the tablets home, use them, and hope for the best. And we were seeing complications from that. We were seeing women coming back into our clinics, in our terminology, incomplete. Ira mentioned incompleteness. So this, the medical abortion, the abortion pills had not worked correctly, and she needed further care, and that was increasing as time went on.
So a narrative that this was helpful for women actually gave way to a reality of pushing abortion and making as many abortions as possible through means that were the least safe possible option, you might say. What do you think motivated this shift in strategy?
I think quite bluntly, the thing that motivated is reach. So these organizations, they talk about reach and impact. Reach is all about numbers. And I was running the clinics overseas, about 500 clinics, and there was a limit on how many women we could serve in those clinics. But once you ship pills out through drug shops, there is no limit. And so it was all about driving the numbers up. And organizations like Mary Stopes deciding that actually, if we're going to have impact, if we're going to serve more women with abortion, and therefore satisfy our donors' demands that they want more numbers, okay, then the best way is through self-managed medical abortion, over-the-counter, do-it-yourself, whatever terminology you want to use for it. So it's all about numbers, Lois.
All about numbers. It's so horrifying that women are being put at risk for the sake of driving up the number of abortions that an organization can report. Now, that is internationally, but in the UK, we've actually been seeing the same kind of strategy where abortion clinics are going for numbers and pills above anything else, above any kind of nod to a rhetoric that this would ever be helpful to women.
Yeah, so this strategy was a global strategy, let's say 2016, round about then. And we knew there would be complications. We knew some women would need further help, that the pills wouldn't work. And when we talked about that, one of our American colleagues, not that there's anything wrong with Americans, you understand, but one of our American colleagues said, yes, we know there's going to be complications, and we know this will fail from time to time, but it's better than a sharp stick. And that was the global strategy. And in 2020, we saw that global strategy come right here into the UK in telemedicine, pills by post. And they used the COVID-19 lockdown, the whole pandemic thing, as an excuse, as a way of getting in, a strategy that they were already working on. This wasn't new just for COVID, okay? So telemedicine comes in, no longer women going to clinics, no longer getting assessments, no longer getting comprehensive care, one simple telephone call, the pills sent out to their home, and they use the pills at home. And what we're seeing, bizarrely, is the same issue. It's not working for all women. And it's not being reported, as Ira said. The reporting is really, there's a big gap in reporting, okay? But, lots of these women end up with complications because the medical abortion doesn't always work.
Of course, and obviously we all know that abortion is never safe, because it's certainly never safe for the baby. And indeed, we know from speeches this morning from Callum and Ira that it has a terrible impact on, or can have a terrible impact on, mental health and physical health. And yet, even more cuts are being made to make it even more dangerous for women through the strategy of these clinics, clearly not having the best interests of these women in mind at all. Now,
can I just wrap up on that? How can it be all for the woman if all you're doing is shipping a box of pills to their home and letting the woman do it herself? That's not healthcare. Okay?
Absolutely right. And I'll just ask you one more question to probe further on that, because the Care Quality Commission has been investigating these clinics as well, and they found that it's certainly not healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about those investigations?
Well, the Care Quality Commission themselves are in difficulties. They've had a lot of difficult time recently, changed of chief executive and team, where it came out that they just aren't really inspecting hospitals and care homes to the frequency that they're meant to be doing. In terms of the abortion clinics, our analysis is showing that there are many abortion clinics that have not been visited since before 2020. So this major shift in how they operate into telemedicine and pills by post, the CQC is yet to catch up with how it inspects the provision of that care. It still visits clinics, but the clinics are not providing the majority of abortions anymore. Okay? And some of those clinics that were rated by the CQC as needing improvement, 3 years later, they still haven't been re-inspected. So if you are the regulator for the NHS and you inspect a clinic and the clinic fails and it needs improvement and you put in an improvement plan, how long do you think you need to leave the team with their improvement plan before you come back to make sure that they've done all of the things that they were meant to do? And what we're seeing is all of the ones assessed needing improvement have not been revisited in the last 2 or 3 years.
There's just such a lack of care about what is going on in these clinics. Haywood, let me come back to you. As an abortionist who was active in the 70s, how are you surveying the landscape today? What changes are you seeing? What red flags should we be noticing about abortion clinics today?
Well, basically what we're seeing has been well illustrated by my colleague here, and that is we basically have totally unregulated, essentially it may as well be over-the-counter abortion. It's been a financial boon for the abortion industry or the abortion cartel, because now all you need is an individual to write a prescription. And that prescription is either taken to the pharmacy by the woman or mailed, or there may be at one time an interaction over the computer or over the web. But the reality of it, a woman can get one of these pills, or a man, and they can take whatever dose. You know how people think, well, if I'm pregnant so many weeks and I'm a little bit further along, 2 pills would be better than 1, clearly, right? So we're not having any evaluation of these women prior to them doing their do-it-yourself home abortion, which when I think about it, how lonely, how horrible an experience it must be for these women who take a pill, kill their child, go through pain, go through bleeding, and pass their baby in the toilet or somewhere, and then they're wondering what to do with the remains. And they go through this process, many times all alone. What a horrible experience. The Food and Drug Administration in the United States, which is supposed to be dealing with the public welfare and the public health of women, there is no monitoring regarding the complications. I call it the kill pill because that's what it's all about. It's not really, we know it's not really medicine. But what we're seeing is this agency that's supposed to be protecting the public welfare, they aren't monitoring anything that has to do with the complications of this kill pill, except for possibly the incidence of death. What these women are doing, they're told that if they have a complication with the abortion pill, bleeding that they think is more than they can handle, or pain, just simply go to the emergency room and tell them you're having a miscarriage. So that also leads to not being able to follow the monitoring and statistics very well at all. How many abortions are going on? Even during the time when I was doing abortions and they were mechanical abortions rather than chemical now, you know, we'd lie about how many abortions we're doing. Now, come on now, a murderer is a liar, right? I mean, we just make it up. So we're dealing with an industry of death. A liar is a murderer. We're harming women physically and, of course, psychologically. And we may as well be passing this medicine. I'm not advocating it to make it over the counter, but it just may as well be, because people are taking this poison basically without any supervision at all.
Horrific. Haywood, I'm conscious that we left your story when you were still moonlighting in the 70s as an abortionist. And yet here you are sitting today on this panel at the March for Life UK. So something has changed since then. What was the moment that you just thought, I have to get out of here, I can't do it anymore?
Well, it's funny, we're sitting here talking about abortion in the house of God, which we should be the ones setting the standard as He's set our standards for life, amen? Well, our Lord creates all life, and each and every one of us are a single addition, and because of the way He's designed DNA, there never has been and never will be a production like you. It's so special, and He knows every hair on our head. Well, anyway, back in 1986, I had my Damascus Road experience actually in a church at a Christian music concert. And it was performed by an artist by the name of Leon Patillo. And during that concert, there was an intermission where he prayed, have anyone want things to be 100% right with God to stand up? Well, you know me, why not? Stand up. I want things to be 100% right with God, right? Now, I just want to say as a sidebar, up until that time and all since my childhood, you know, I had attended church and almost every Sunday up until the time that I went off to college. But I've got to remind us that just attending church does not make you a believer or a follower of Christ, no more than if you go to sleep in your garage, you're going to wake up the next day a car. But I lived a life as a good guy, but I just knew something was missing. Well, just think about it. What kind of person is that individual that can walk into a room and for some money and take a child from a woman and do that time after time after time? Well, after I stood and Leon Patillo, that artist, prayed for the people that wanted things to be 100% right with God, well, honestly, at that moment, even though God knew it was my Damascus Road experience, I didn't know. But then came the process of becoming aware of my salvation in Jesus Christ and how, indeed, that Damascus Road experience was when I went from being Haywood, who was, I was my own Lord, to Jesus became Lord, and he transformed me by the renewing of our mind. The actions that I was taking comes from being deceived into thinking that I am Lord. And when you think about it, it's a very powerful thing that I could be in a hospital and walk in one room and deliver a child and be involved with the most precious and holy time that can happen, the delivery of a new human being from the inside of another. But I could walk just a few yards down the hall to another room and kill a baby. Even though I didn't think of myself as God, that's a tremendous God-like opportunity, so to speak, to know that on one hand I have the opportunity to bring life, and on the other hand to bring death. Now I go into this, I was blessed along with my late wife who helped train me to do abortions, and we did abortions together. We had a book published, The Scalpel and the Soul, which is available. You can get that off the website with 40 Days for Life or Amazon or wherever, that goes into depth on my experience, that conversion experience, and how God took us from being pro-death advocates, making money doing abortion, and even after we stopped doing abortions, there were several years there where we still believed in it, even though we were practicing regular medicine. If someone came to the office and asked for an abortion, we say, well, we don't do it, but here's your trifold pamphlet that's going to tell you where to go get your abortion. And I just want to remind you and remind us that it doesn't matter whether you answer the telephone, whether you're the nurse, whether you're whatever. If you're on that abortion team, you're an accessory to that crime, whether you're, like I said, answering the phone or as a referrer, giving a pamphlet to a woman to tell her where she can go have her child killed. And so now, after I became a pro-life warrior, became a believer and a follower of Christ, my first ministry, well, was Operation Rescue, where I had the opportunity to, graduate from Yale a couple of times. The next thing was the Pregnancy Resource Center, which most of us know about, and I just tell you that it was an opportunity that opened my eyes to see how the other side works and how God can use people like you and people like me to give a true life-affirming choice to women so they don't have to destroy their babies. I was able to be involved with pregnancy resource centers during the advent of ultrasound, when we first brought ultrasound on into pregnancy resource centers. And we know now that an abortion-minded woman, when given the opportunity for an ultrasound, will 80% of the time or so decide to keep their child. So it's been a beautiful walk. So I've been able to go from London to Houston to Dallas to New York or wherever, working for life, and I'm going to continue to do it till I'm not breathing and my heart's not beating. Amen.
Well, thank you for sharing a bit of your incredible journey, and do take a look at the book, Our Radical Transformation, The Scalpel and the Soul, Our Radical Transformation as Husband and Wife Abortion Doctors, to get all the details on that incredible story. Kevin, you actually had a fairly similar experience coming out of the abortion industry, being hit by the reality of what was happening. Can you tell us a little bit about, can you relate to that experience of Haywood's? And what would be your advice for people coming out of the industry today? What were your next steps straight after handing in your notice?
Well, I'll come to that, okay. So I think that I said to you that I had joined Mary Stopes and from this public health harm reduction approach. And I could see as the years were going on, I was there for 6 years, so by midway through that, I was starting to see that there was no harm reduction strategy, that it was all about, as I said, the do-it-yourself and the numbers and the reach. So that had fallen away. From my Christian faith, there were obviously, through those years, interesting challenges. I mean, I'd stopped talking about it. That's number one. I'd stopped talking about it with most people when they asked me where I worked or what I was doing, what was I going to Africa or, Asia on all these trips for. I would just say something like, I was working in women's health. And if people pushed any further than that, I would relate to, there were 2 countries where we had maternity hospitals, and so it was easier to talk about those than it was about the abortion clinics. But I was challenged. And in my own thinking, in my faith, the bit that I could never get over was I knew that obviously this was a new life, a unique, living human. But the big question was always about personhood or ensoulment or value, rights, whatever words you want to use. So at what point did this new life have value? At what point did God grant value or, as the church talked about hundreds of years ago, the ensoulment? And I was reading, ensoulment, some of the fathers were saying that, ensoulment happens when the quickening, when a woman first senses the baby moving. And I'm thinking, goodness me, that's like 16, 18 weeks. That's a long way into pregnancy. No, that doesn't feel right. And to cut a very, it took time. And to get to the point, for me, it was considering the incarnation. It was considering when God chose, when the Word of God chose to come as flesh, when God decided to come here for us and to be with us and to be one of us, God chose to do that from the moment of conception. Okay? And for me, that was the revelation. That was the bit that changed everything, because it was like the Psalms and knitting me together in my mother's womb and so on, didn't really get it. But once I bought into, there was a personhood of God, there was a Trinity of God from the very beginning, always and forevermore. And when Jesus came in Mary's womb, did that change? It's not great theology, but did that change? Did the Trinity disappear for a period of time until such point as Jesus in Mary's womb had value and ensoulment? No. From conception. And so once I bought that, then I realized all of what I was doing, not just ending life, but a life that was valued, a life that God valued, a life that was God-given, okay? And so my word to any of us, I don't know if there's anybody in this room still, doing what I was doing or what we were doing. But if you're involved, just stop it. If you're a nurse, a midwife, there are other ways to be nurses and midwives without involving yourself in abortion. either working for an abortion clinic or doing abortions in the NHS. Use your conscience right. Object if you're asked to do it. You don't have to do it, okay? Just say your conscience doesn't allow you to participate and stop doing it, okay? It's not something any of us should be doing. Okay, let me just very, very quickly answer the other part of that question. So what should you do if you came out? So when I came out and walked away from my consulting business in those days, it took a couple of months of a gap, and then I thought, okay, I better, I want to go and do something else. And my sense was, no, you're in this for a bit longer. Go and talk to some of these other people in the pro-life organizations. And so I made contact with a few of them. You know what? It was like, you know that thing, the rolling weed, the crickets, the tumbleweed, the silence? That's what I got, okay? I'm not criticizing, it's just what happened, you know. There was a long, long time before the first of you actually thought, maybe I'll risk having a quick meeting with Kevin. I'll invite him for a coffee or whatever. And that person's probably in the room right now. I saw him earlier on. Of course, he didn't turn up on his own. He brought 2 friends with him, just in case I wasn't the genuine article. And I was there to shop him, you know.
Good, but thankfully I had a happy ending. And here you are today. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Adam, and I come to you finally. You experienced abortion in many different aspects, both being in the clinic, also it touched your personal life with a former girlfriend. Yet here you are today. So what helped you make that transition, and what would be your advice for people coming to terms with how abortion has impacted their lives?
Well, this conference is so important because the more we learn about abortion, calling abortion healthcare because it involves doctors and drugs is like calling the death penalty healthcare because that also involves doctors and drugs. And that's important that people understand the truth. So after I spent those 2 clinics in theatre and that comment, I wonder if they'll be grieving, I realized that abortion was not good for women. After the abortion I'd paid for with a previous girlfriend, we met soon afterwards. We broke up soon afterwards as well, but she said she was worried about her fertility. So I realized it wasn't good for women, but I would call myself passively pro-life. I knew it wasn't for me, but I wasn't going to stop anyone else having an abortion, and I think there's probably many, many people in this country in that category. So when my wife got pregnant with my kids, she was older. They always, do you want a Down syndrome test? We declined that because I knew there was no way I was paying for a second abortion, so it didn't matter. And my 2 children are here now, and luckily they made it. But the reality is I've actually got 4 children. I've got my son Jacob, who died in an abortion with a previous girlfriend. And we also had a miscarriage, Bobby, who's the sibling of the 2 sitting here. And it was the reason I'm sitting here now, and the reason why I'm on trial, unbelievably, in 2 weeks' time, for praying silently outside of an abortion clinic is I converted to Christianity, and about 10 days or so after I was baptized, I had a very graphic dream. Now, the baptism, we go into the water a sinner, we come out washed clean of our sins. That symbolism is very, very, very important. I hadn't thought about that abortion in 20 years. It hadn't even crossed my mind. God knew that, realized that I needed to clear my conscience of that, and he realized I wasn't going to figure it out for myself. So I had a very graphic dream in which I butchered my son. I knew it was my son, and I essentially carved him up like I was carving up the Sunday roast. And in the dream, I felt absolutely nothing whatsoever. And this is something you hear from the pro-abortion lobby, actually, and I understand what they're saying, because I was there myself for 20 years. It never occurred to me. Some of the people on the other side of the road with the loud hailer right now have probably gone through abortions and thinking, what's the problem? But the reality is you've killed your own child, and God showed me that. That made me look into the issue of abortion, which then I got in contact with some people, and I started praying outside of abortion clinics.
But there is hope, isn't there, for those who have been touched by this? And I know that you went through some post-abortion counselling, and that's available as well through many of the charities that are even here today.
Yes.
And that's available for those who have been involved in the industry or have been involved as somebody who's gone through it themselves.
Absolutely. But so post-abortion counselling, there may be people in this audience or watching on the Facebook that, post-abortion counselling is absolutely crucial. I went through that process. That's where I named my son. And it's acknowledging what you've done. You have to acknowledge what you've done. There's no healing without acknowledgement. And again, the abortion industry offer counselling, but the counselling they offer is one of, oh, you did the right thing, it was just a blob of tissue, it wasn't a real baby. But that's not satisfying because it's a lie, it's based on a lie. Whereas the counselling I received and that many, Rachel's Vineyard and other organisations offer, the key thing is to acknowledge that loss of life. And once you acknowledge that, you can find peace with that. And I have peace knowing that God is taking care of my two children that aren't here. And I would encourage anyone who's perhaps been involved in the abortion industry or have themselves paid for an abortion, that they seek that counselling. And also one other point to make is that fathers are crucial in this debate, despite what the other side want to say. If any father is watching this now or maybe watches this later, you are absolutely crucial to saving the life of your child. This is where I absolutely failed, actually, as a father. If you are watching this now and you're a father, step up, be the husband or the partner to your husband, to your wife or your girlfriend, and just know that you are absolutely crucial to saving the life of your child.
Incredible. Well, we are also thankful for all three of you and the work that you're doing today to promote that culture of life and to save women and babies from abortion. So please join me in thanking our panel.